Welcome everyone to Cerulean Arts Gallery for tonight's tour and talk for the exhibition Intrigues and Intimations, featuring the sculpture of Matthew Courtney and the paintings of Csaszar. The show is up through October 23rd, and hope you can come down and see it. You can also see everything on our website. And we do have a couple events, programs associated with the show. Matt's doing a mold making demo on Saturday, and Tom's doing a group in-person critique next Saturday. So if you're interested. So what I'm going to do here is spotlight Tina's camera. So she's going to float through the show, and the artists can talk to us about, I mean, give us a little bit of background and then talk about their work and thoughts and life, the universe and everything. Would one or the other like to go first?
Well, I'd just like to say that I think Tina did a wonderful and surprising job of putting these together. I don't know how Matt feels about it, but I'm really happy that these worked out well together. And it's funny, in a way, I think Matt's works bring out kind of a quizzical sense of humor that it then quickly turns into something other than a sense of humor, like how did the world get this way sort of sense. He brings that out in my work, and I'm not sure what I bring out in his work. Maybe he'll tell me, but it's something about the, sometimes I think his work looks predetermined, but there's something very unexpected about most of his pieces, I would say. But I don't know, I'll start there. I don't know if Matt has any comments.
Can you talk about my work? Oh. It's fantastic.
Yes, if you'll talk about my work, maybe that's the way we should do it. Now, I will comment that one of the people at the opening found this particular work of the turtle very disturbing because she'd been to markets, I believe in Panama, where they sell turtles this way on their back, because that's how you keep them from running away, basically. But I don't know if you had that in mind with the extra legs or the, you know, kind of flipping on its back, and it's now, it's called impuissance, I think.
Yeah, it's sort of helpless, I think, is the. I didn't want to write the word helpless, so I used the thesaurus and found a vague word. But this piece is more literal than most of my work. But this developed when I was in China, and I discovered that their version of Atlas is a turtle. So it's, the turtle holds up the universe, and they have these really neat columns of text that are about the size of a car that sit on a turtle's back, and the turtle's facing you. So this was me just doing a topsy-turvy world. The turtle's been flipped over, and you know, where did the universe go? Anyway, I mean, but it's, most of my work is supposed to be funny and a little bit have an edge. So that interpretation, whoever said that makes them a little uncomfortable, I think is spot on. That's my hope.
Yeah. Well, and it's fascinating that it's kind of a mythological reference, because I think you kind of get to that eventually, but that's not the first thing one thinks of, perhaps, looking at it. I don't know if do you know the reference that of the Bertrand Russell piece about the turtles, where he commented, he basically told the story you just told, and the woman said, "But what's the turtle standing on?" And his response was, "Well, it's turtles all the way down."
Good response.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how to interpret your work. I've always been jealous of abstract expressionism, and I wish I could do it, but I always admire it, and that's my favorite work. Is generally abstract expressionist work that I see. I think John Chamberlain is my favorite sculptor, with the twisted metal and stuff. And
yeah. Well, I guess Tina's kind of inspiring us to improvise as we go along, as these images come up. I think any work of art is a presentation of something you find valuable and something that one finds. It's a presentation of the self in the world that one might show to someone else to find something meaningful in, which again is kind of how I view your works. And So if you ask, so what is it that an abstract painting does that's perhaps different than other types of painting or modes of painting? Well, it keeps you from going immediately to what its reference is in the everyday world. I would argue there are multiple references to things in the everyday world in paintings such as this, in terms of space and figure and tension and mood, and that where you're kind of speaking to is this notion of what is it that you find valuable when things are not told to you as blatantly as a story. For instance, in this work, it's titled Four Movements, basically because after I made it and figured out how I wanted it to resolve itself, I sort of saw it as four different relationships of yellow, green, blue, and kind of ochre that kind of come together in the center, which is where the camera's pointed right now. And that each of these implies a certain structure which it then questions or challenges or maybe even refutes. And if you're thinking of works like this in terms of what they evoke, you could think of, well, what does any work of art evoke? It's not a literal discussion of details of your life, as if you said to me, well, what happened to you today? And I started saying, well, from 12 midnight until 8:05, I was in bed, and then I got up, and then I could go on for 3 hours, and then you'd say, yes, but still, what happened to you today? And what I think one is looking for is something that focuses on something of value that you want to share with someone else. I mean, I love this image because I've always, since I saw it, loved the penguin satisfaction.
Yeah, that was just my my response to the piece. He looks satisfied, or she looks satisfied, and I got to a point with it where I was satisfied. It's tricky doing this sort of glazing with ceramics because you don't know what the colors are going to look like until they come out of the kiln. You have to sort of guess and hope. And I was doing some unusual things in the painting things over glaze that was meant to be under the glaze. So I was painting the glaze, having it come out, and then doing it again and again and again. And then, like I said, using the material in a way it wasn't always intended to be used. But, you know, it's nice when, you know, I'm hoping for something to happen and then it does happen. So that's why this one is satisfaction.
Well, and it's such a rich surface that is just so beautiful.
Yeah, it's something I've ignored for a long time, and I just felt it was time to start with it. I've been sort of looking at Tang Dynasty, or Chinese Tang Dynasty ceramics, which has 3 colors on it that are drippy, and I've sort of referenced that. Actually, the first time I referenced it was in 2014 in the show at Cerulean with a camel. That was the first camel I made, and I don't know, I felt like I was relying on that ceramic history reference a little too much. And so I tried to spin off of that and spend more time with the surface and a little less with the form. But it's tricky marrying form and surface and something that's representational with a sort of abstract expressionist sort of surface treatment. So it's a funny balancing act, and this is my first shot at it. So I'm happy so far.
So Matt, what is your background? Like, you teach at UArts and other places. Where did you learn ceramics and such?
I was introduced to Bruno Laverdier when I was about 16 years old, and he just passed away this year. He was a well-known, very accomplished ceramic artist, and it just triggered my interest. And for some reason, I went into industrial design because I was afraid to dedicate myself to the fine art. I thought that the industrial design would be the best of both worlds, with a career and you know, design art stuff. And I didn't really like it that much. So, but when I was in undergrad school, I switched over to ceramics and then switched back to an ID. So it took me 6 years to graduate, but I did get to be a junior at the ceramics program at what was then the Philadelphia College of Art. And then I went to graduate school. After working in the design field for about 3 years, I went to graduate school out at Kent State, studied with a guy named Kirk Mangus out there. That's the story. Then I came back to Philly as a member of the Clay Studio to work there, actually.
It's marvelous how the material becomes so engrossed with the image of these bizarre creatures like this one with two heads.
Yeah, can I share a picture, Michael?
Sure.
See if I can get this to work. Share screen. Desktop. So I share. There we go. So those are the camels at the University of Pennsylvania Museum. Is that on the screen?
Yes.
So I ran across these in probably 1978, and that's a direct reference. I just wanted to show you all that. And then in my time in China was in the area where there was all the museums they were taking me to had a lot of these camels, and these are buried with people, and to give them something to ride around on in their afterlife. But that's a Tang Dynasty glazing situation. And that camel that we were looking at, stop share, is a direct copy of one of those in that case. I went back there and took, yeah, that one. All of them, actually. I made a mold of the one, and it's a direct copy of one of those camels in the case. And then I distort them. I pop them out of the mold and distort them and bend them and stuff.
When you leave like the seams and the joins of the mold, like you're not trying to smooth them out. I mean, it's obvious, like it's put together.
Yeah, I just think that's my intuition at work. To me, being punk rock when I started doing it, but I don't think it is anymore. Excuse me. I really appreciate materials and process, and so that was how I was expressing that before I started to experiment more with the glazes. Sort of spontaneity, but trying to be on the more neat side of messy. So try not to be sloppy, but show gesture. That's the plan.
You know, one of the things I'd say kind of the conversation that bounces back and forth between your work and my work has to do with gesture and rhythm, and how you can pin this down to really specific things, such as the animals, and then you can free it up from that. In your case, in the glazes, in my case, sort of intimating or inquiring about spaces that seem dreamlike, like you're drawn into them, but also that free you to imagine other things. I guess you might put it that way. It's sort of hard to verbalize some of these things. I mean, one can talk about the process, and that's definitely part of what the work addresses. But then hopefully there's something else as the viewer looks at it that one feels able to come in contact with that is actually familiar. I mean, I'd say in both your works and my works, they're kind of familiar things and then unfamiliar things, and they create a tension which actually creates some sort of value that I would like to pass on to the viewer as an experience for them to consider.
Yeah, I do appreciate the idea of universality, and you know, I've had arguments with people who say that they don't believe it exists, but I look at your paintings by sort of wiping the slate clean, and I just sort of stare at them and enjoy them. Is how that's how I view them.
Matt, there's a question for you in the chat. Did the photo of the case in the museum with the double reflection influence your experimenting with multiple parts of the animal?
Oh, I see. The reflection of the plexiglass.
Yes.
No, it didn't directly, but I do like that photograph. I do like the reflection in the photograph, and I can see the connection. But I didn't. I mean, almost 70% of what I do is intuitive, so it's possible.
So how about you, Tom? When you're faced with a canvas, what's your approach? Is it intuitive, or do you have a plan?
I start to work with the materials and then develop a plan, which often changes in the middle of the process. The one on the left is probably one where I stuck closer to the plan than usual in terms of just discussing relationships between people, relationships between colors, as the title indicates, sort of a reference to the narrative at the end of the Iliad, in the relationship between Paris and Oenone that I won't go on and on about, but it doesn't end well for Paris. And sometimes some of those references stay there, and sometimes I think to myself, well, they don't really need to be tied that specifically. I can really free them up and let the tensions in the work encourage the viewer to see what the potentials for meanings and responses to them are. And actually, the last two images are examples of how Tina or Michael are put together the show, because the rocket ship and the Paris and Oenone piece, which obviously come from very different points in history, seem to both, to me, connect in terms of you have hopes that are not always realized. You have hopes that a rocket ship is going to do certain things that doesn't always get realized. It seems like this rocket ship is kind of forlorn in some ways to me, both in its form and in its the use of the glazes. And the other image with the snowmen and Lords of Sound and Lesser Things, which was the title of that painting, to me also comment on how you respond to the shapes and then you start to engage what is sort of going on between the shapes, the relationships that are set up, and the relationships between this weird clunky thing of sticking these pieces of wood in this ceramic piece. And in the case of the painting, this weird thing where for me it almost comes into focus as a space, but just takes one step back from that to let the viewer complete the space, is the way I would put it. And hopefully complete it with some kind of narrative and drama and emotion.
I didn't see the circle with the brown rectangle coming out of it before just now. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Tom, that seems to be a bit of a different painting for you. Is it? I mean, it's more open. The shapes are more defined.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the space, the way I would describe it is the spaces have more to do with the interaction of the planes and the relationship of the planes and the tensions they create than and what the material does within those areas, rather than how the material goes back and forth between the areas. And yes, some of the paintings look like that when they get started, some of them don't. Some of them end up like that more, and some of them don't. Because as Matt was saying, you plan certain things and then you reach a point where you let yourself be surprised by what happens, because that's how they actually stop from being frozen or inert or unable to evoke potential meanings in the viewer, rather than say, oh, why don't you think precisely about how this kind of salmon color interacts with this ochre, this rich red brown. Well, instead of me telling you exactly how to address that, it's basically leaving it open for the viewer to respond and then see how the response fits what you're looking at.
And do we have a question for you, Tom?
Oh.
Sense of the grid in your paintings and what your thoughts are about that?
Yes. Can I ask who asked that question?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Tom.
Hi. Yes. I have a whole series of paintings which are not being shown here, which are grids. And some of these paintings start as grids and some of them start with me thinking of grids. And often the grids allow me to intermix both the colors and the marks that are made in the work. So I had a show in Ambler in 2017 where actually some of the grid paintings were shown with these, and it became obvious. And I think it still is obvious. And I think that's an interesting way to approach space in terms of the human interaction with architectural space, if we want to talk about grids as architectural space, or the human interaction with sort of games and how we strategize. But that might be going a little far afield. I actually think Matt's works too talk about kind of how we play as a child in terms of, I mean, our relationship to animals, I won't go on about, but obviously that kind of fits into how we see ourselves moving about in the world, or as in this painting, how the grids set up a structure which can then be challenged and create a certain kind of narrative tension.
I did used to speak about the act of playing in my artist statement, and sort of getting lost in what you're doing and making decisions as you go along, which Tom, you mentioned about changing your mind. I try to pass that on to my students about how they don't have to stay on a track. They can make decisions and stray from their original plan, which I do often. I'll get going and sort of play, get a feel for it, try something. If it doesn't work, in this case, if it didn't work, I was able to just put more glaze on it and pop it back in the kiln. I haven't done that in the past. Usually, if it didn't work, and I would dismiss that piece. But this time around, I would just keep firing it with new colors. And if something was too happy and bright, I would dull it down with a darker color and maybe with a matte something over it, and see how that broke apart over top of the glaze. And so it was actually quite a bit of fun this time playing with the surface rather than focusing so much on form.
And you can reglaze these things, Matt, several times?
Well, it's not recommended. Like, one of my students walked in and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you, but I don't recommend doing it." So I have been firing these several times, and it's difficult because once the surface is no longer porous, you can imagine painting oil paint on a piece of glass or something. It takes forever to dry, and I would have to apply the glaze, come back the next day and apply some more, trying to remember what I did last time, because the colors are not always reflective of what they're going to be after they flux. So it would take several days to get a round of glaze on it and then pop it in the kiln. Then I was getting them out of the kiln pretty quickly, about a day, and then I would assess it for a day or two and then go back at it.
Well, yeah, it's a funny thing about technique, which exists in all media and kind of in performance and in various kind of cross media. But there's always some, and ceramics, I gather from my little limited knowledge of it, has a great deal of attention to technique, but then those techniques can be played with, altered, interrupted, changed. There's a painter, Catherine Murphy, who taught at Yale, and she had a video on YouTube about a year ago or so. And she talked about the fact that she never really taught painting techniques, because her view was you think about what you want to do or what you want to accomplish, and then you figure out how you can do it, given the fact, obviously, you have to be familiar with the technique or else you can't get it to do what you want it to do. But yes, like for instance, this painting on the left started out with various different elements that got painted over, erased, changed. That lighter brownish square on the lower section you can't see quite, but there are pencil marks there that are sort of like what you were Matt, you were describing in terms of, I mean, you shouldn't really draw on top of paint, but if you feel like that is needed for the, it's not the detail, it's actually the tension and mood of the piece, the drama you're trying to create, or maybe you're trying to say, pay attention to this because this is now drawn on in a certain way, or look at how this glaze didn't quite work the way the other glaze worked. But the only things that are mistakes you can't figure out what to do with to really get them to work for you. And then you just have to throw it away, as you were saying. But if you can get them to work, they really are, although they don't fulfill your immediate intentions, they often can reveal something you weren't seeing in the work.
Yeah, the shape of that, the vase that you spoke to me about, with the split and the ball, the single ball in it, really didn't appeal to me when it first came out of the kiln. It's one right to the right there, Tina, the vase with the split. But that one, I felt like I just hammered away at it until I got it to a place where I liked it. Originally, that was a little bit too bright and sort of Eastery, or I don't know, some sort of had a holiday feeling to it, and I kind of darkened it or dulled it or gave it a little bit of an ominous color to it. Actually, it's not quite a pleasing color, which was I was trying to work towards, was because it seemed like everything was working too well. So not sure if I'm articulating what I'm meaning to say, but it was too nice, and I kind of the shape wasn't right at first, and then all of a sudden it was very pretty, and then I worked it back to where it is now, which I'm happy with.
So Matt, John Paris is asking if you're trying to annihilate the forms.
Well, this is a little bit of a new territory for me, so not really. I mean, if we could look at the green bowling pin, I think the color enhances that form for some reason. No, I'm trying to find some sort of a balance between the color and stuff and the form. Too much surface treatment does make it difficult to see its form in some instances, but like these are pretty simple shapes, and I was really happy with the way the surface treatment, the colors married with the shape. I think that black vase with a lot of handles on it, a lot of the shapes disappear. So in some cases it happens, and I don't know how intentional I'm being. I'm working on it and then getting it out of the kiln, stepping back, looking at it for about 2 days, and then trying to work on it some more. You know, steering it in one direction or another. It's often I'm not intentionally steering it in one direction, but sometimes I am. Often it's like, this isn't right, I have to try something and see how it turns out. But I think the the more complicated the shape, the more the surface starts to distract from it or obliterate it, or make it disappear. A lot of my shapes are pretty straightforward, though.
But at some point with the bowling pin, you decided to give it a face and turn it into kind of a ghost, or it went from being a simple shape to kind of, as you talked with the one with the red ball in its mouth, it became a little threatening or strange or bizarre.
Yeah, I originally did that with spheres that were, it was a cast bowling ball, and I would quickly just jam my thumb and two fingers in to the bowling ball, and they look like very startled or distressed faces, people's faces, the bowling balls, and I would hang those on the wall. So this is kind of segueing over to the bowling pin, the three holes in the bowling ball and the face that you get from that. I try to do it quickly. It's always risky because you don't know what's going to happen. But that was intentional. I mean, the bowling pin is a shape that is like a person. And that's one of the things I like about it, sort of a dumpy person. I really enjoy that shape. And I like that it's made out of ceramic and it's designed to tip over. I think that's kind of funny, or maybe risky with art. But yeah, so well, anyway, that's the origin of that face.
Mm-hmm.
So both of you teach. Does that like add, detract, or neutral to your practice as an artist, as artists?
You want to go first, Tom?
Well, I planned my life around never teaching because I thought why would I want to spend time telling someone to do what I want to do? It didn't seem to make sense to me. And then somebody offered me a position and said, well, somebody wasn't able to do this, so can you step in? And I thought, well, fine, I'll step in and do this. And what I found is that actually the conversation, the interaction that takes place when you're talking with people about their work, it provokes you to have discussions with your own work, to open up your work to being in dialogue with other people. And that actually then, for me, became an interesting parallel to the process of making a painting, because as you were thinking about other people's work, you had to find a way to enter it and then move around in it. And that was a similar process that I had always been going through, but then realized was of value when you expanded to teaching. Plus, actually, my whole goal early on was to see a connection between drawing and writing, as in writing a poem or writing a story and drawing on the surface. And somehow, in a way that I'm not going to explain right now because I can't, that actually connects up with teaching, with having conversations with other people about things, using words to talk about what it is you're trying to emphasize in something that can't be easily put into words.
Yeah, I guess I have a similar feeling to it. It's being engaged every day with art making process, people thinking about it, people doing it, just going into the studio, seeing things happening in the studio. I've always felt kind of uncomfortable talking about art, and I took a poetry analysis class once, a writing class, to try to help me out with that. But it's really helpful for me to talk to the students about what their intentions are, and try to coax it out of them and get them to get their ideas, to manifest them in the art that they're making. So it's stimulating. It keeps me engaged, to have to get up and go to work and see the studio. Otherwise I might watch TV and not do anything. So I like, and I've always liked being around the students. What do you think, Leo?
You're muted.
Well, I have to say I retired a few years ago, and I do not miss it one bit. Sorry, Matt, that's it. I feel so liberated. I've gotten them out of my brain, finally.
So Leo, for you, the students were actually an interruption to your work somehow. Or-
Mostly, you know, one of the, okay, I'll tell you, one of the most difficult things about teaching that I always found was that it demanded that you be comprehensive, that you have comprehensive knowledge. You know, I taught painting classes and I taught graduate seminars and stuff like that. You know, I'm supposed to talk about postmodernism, all kinds of things that I have no interest in. And you know, I'm a practitioner. I'm a painter. I paint recognizable things. I've gotten to be more and more realistic, and I have no interest in piles of dirt and tar and shit like that.
Mhm.
There you have it.
Well, Matt, I know you need to leave at 1:45 to actually go teach, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, this is, I'm teaching at a community art center, so it's,
Right.
do you either have any closing remarks about the show? And I mean, you guys didn't know each other before the show, right?
No.
oh, it's just such a pleasure to go into the gallery the first day. I can't remember. I think I ran in to drop off
Wow.
museum wax, yeah, so that the pieces didn't tip over. And it was such a pleasant surprise to see all the work together.
Mhm.
Well, Matt, before you go, I just want to say that your work is fantastic. I've always loved it, and this show is like really amazing. Okay, you got to go now. So
Thanks so
we'll
much.
talk some other time.
Yes.
Would like to talk more, but we'll do
Okay.
that.
I hope we get a chance to get together again, Matt, sometime.
Good, I hope so, Tom. It's a pleasure to be in the show with you.
Yes.
Are there any last questions before we adjourn?
Bye, Eileen.
Hi, Karen.
All right. Oh, Nisa, you want to unmute? Nisa, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I find it extremely frustrating not to be in front of the work because of the tactility and the beautiful surfaces. And I really hope to get to see it in the flesh because it's fleshy and beautiful and the sheen and everything. I mean, to walk around it, front, sideways, everything, and to be able to actually have the senses activated is hard on a screen, as we all know.
Then you have to come on down. It's up to
I will.
23rd.
Okay, thank you. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and have a great evening.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Bye, Tina. Bye, Michael.